The spaceship quietly entered Earth's atmosphere, cutting through the sky like a silent predator. Inside the ship sat one of the galaxy's most feared assassins, an alien hitman known as Karok. His mission was simple: eliminate a human who had become a problem for his employers in the Xylorian Empire. Karok had been to many planets, completed countless missions, and had never failed. To him, Earth was just another target, and humans were just another weak species. As the ship hovered above a thick forest, Karok adjusted his breathing mask and checked his weapons. Everything was in place. He had studied human biology and their weaknesses. They were slow, fragile creatures who would be easy to defeat. The hitman smirked under his mask. This mission wouldn't take long, but as Karok prepared to step outside, his sensors picked up something strange. The planet was full of an element he had only seen in small amounts before: water. It wasn't unusual to see water on planets, but Earth was different. Water was everywhere: oceans, rivers, lakes, even the air seemed filled with moisture. Karok frowned. For his species, water was dangerous. Just a few drops could cause severe burns, and enough exposure could be deadly. Strange planet, he muttered to himself, brushing off the worry. He had survived worse environments before. A little water wouldn't stop him. The ship's door opened, and Karok stepped onto the forest floor. The air was damp, and the ground was soft beneath his boots. The hitman activated his cloaking device, disappearing from sight. Now invisible, he moved through the trees, heading toward a small human village where his target lived. As he walked, he noticed the sound of water nearby. A river flowed not far from his path. Karok felt uneasy, but ignored it, focusing on the mission. The hitman's keen senses alerted him to a movement ahead. He stopped and scanned the area. A group of humans was gathering near the river, laughing and splashing water on each other. Karok observed them from a distance. They seemed so carefree, completely unaware that death was watching them. He had no interest in these humans. His target was deeper in the village. As he moved closer to the riverbank, a strange sensation crept over him. His skin felt tight, his breathing heavier. The moisture in the air was making him uncomfortable. Karok shook his head. He couldn't let these small annoyances distract him. His mission was too important. But then something unexpected happened. A single drop of water, flung from one of the human's playful splashes, landed on Karok's arm. It was small, almost insignificant, but the effect was immediate. A sharp, burning pain shot through his body. Karok hissed in agony, jumping back and clutching his arm. His suit had absorbed most of the water, but even that tiny droplet had caused a blistering burn. He could feel the skin beneath his armor boiling. Panic set in. Water, something so harmless to humans, was like acid to him. Karok's heart raced. This mission was supposed to be simple, but now he was faced with a terrifying realization: Earth's most common element could kill him. He quickly retreated, moving farther away from the river. His breathing was shallow and his mind was racing. How could he complete the mission if water was everywhere? How could he survive on this planet where even the air seemed to carry moisture? Karok found cover behind a tree, his arm still burning from the water. He activated a healing patch on his suit, but the fear was already growing inside him. He was no longer the confident hitman he had been when he arrived. Now he was afraid of the very planet he had come to conquer. As he sat there, hidden in the shadows, Karok realized this mission was going to be far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. The humans were no threat to him, but the water was. And water was everywhere. Karok sat under the cover of thick trees, his heart pounding in his chest. His arm still stung from the small droplet of water that had burned through his skin. Never before had he faced such a deadly, invisible enemy. He had battled fierce warriors, dodged deadly traps, and fought his way through hostile environments across the galaxy. But this was something different. Water. The very air around him seemed filled with moisture, and the thought of it terrified him. He pulled out a small scanner from his suit and ran it over his arm. The burn wasn't too deep, but it was enough to remind him of the danger he was in. The scanner also showed high levels of humidity in the air. He couldn't escape the water. It was all around him. Karok tried to calm his nerves, but his instincts were screaming at him to leave this cursed planet. No, he muttered to himself. I can't fail the mission. His employers in the Xylorian Empire were powerful, and failure wasn't an option. He had never failed a mission before, and he wasn't about to start now. Karok took a deep breath and forced himself to focus. The human target was still in the village. All he needed to do was avoid the water and complete his mission. Simple, at least it should have been. Karok stood up and activated his cloaking device once again. He moved carefully through the forest, staying far away from the river and avoiding any damp areas. Every sound of running water made him flinch. The once confident Hitman now felt vulnerable and exposed. Every raindrop, every puddle, every bit of moisture in the air felt like a threat. As he moved closer to the village, Karok's fear only grew. The humans seemed to live in harmony with the water, completely unaware of its deadly potential. Children played near the river, splashing water at each other, while adults carried buckets of water to their homes. Karok watched them from the shadows, his body tense. He couldn't understand how these fragile creatures could live so close to something so dangerous. He checked his suit's water-resistant coating. It had protected him from the worst of the earlier splash, but it wouldn't last forever. His suit wasn't designed for long-term exposure to moisture, and he had already pushed it to its limit. The thought of his suit failing in the middle of a mission sent a chill down his spine. Karok reached the edge of the village, keeping a safe distance from any water sources. His target, a human scientist, was inside a small building at the center of the village. The hitman needed to plan his approach carefully. He couldn't risk getting too close to the humans, especially near water. But every time he tried to think of a plan, the image of that burning droplet flashed in his mind. He could still feel the searing pain in his arm. The fear of more water was overwhelming, clouding his judgment. He crouched behind a wooden fence, observing the building where his target was. He could easily sneak in, take out the human, and leave before anyone noticed. But the closer he got to the village, the wetter the ground became. It had rained earlier, and the ground was soaked with puddles. Karok cursed under his breath. There was no way he could avoid all the water. Suddenly, the sound of raindrops tapping on the leaves above made him freeze. He looked up and saw dark clouds gathering overhead. A storm was coming. Panic gripped him. The thought of rain, of water falling from the sky, was too much to bear. His breathing quickened as the first few drops hit the ground around him. "No, not now," he growled, trying to find shelter. He dashed into the nearest building, but the roof had holes, and rainwater dripped through, splashing onto the floor. Karok felt trapped. He couldn't stay in the village, and he couldn't escape the rain. His worst fear had become reality. He was surrounded by the very thing that could kill him. As the rain poured down outside, Karok realized that this mission was turning into a nightmare. His fear of water was growing stronger, and he wasn't sure how much longer he could survive on this planet. The hitman, once feared across the galaxy, was now terrified of Earth's rain. The rain poured down in heavy sheets, drenching the village as Karok huddled inside the small, leaky building. His body trembled with fear as he watched the water drip from the ceiling. He could feel the moisture in the air, and every drop of rain that splashed near him sent shivers down his spine. He had never felt so helpless. But Karok wasn't the only one dealing with the storm. The humans in the village had taken notice of something strange, a presence. They couldn't see Karok because of his cloaking device, but they had noticed odd disturbances in the environment. Footprints in the mud, a sudden rustle in the trees, a strange shimmer in the air. The villagers were no longer relaxed. They knew something was wrong. As Karok tried to find a dry corner of the building, he heard voices approaching. A group of humans armed with makeshift weapons, sticks, farming tools, and knives was gathering outside. They had no idea what was stalking them, but they weren't going to sit back and wait for it to strike. The humans were preparing to defend their village. Karok gritted his teeth. He wasn't afraid of the humans themselves. They were weak, fragile beings. But the water had drained his confidence, and now, with the rain soaking everything around him, he was on edge. He checked his weapons, his hands shaking slightly. The hitman knew he had to strike before the humans became too organized. If he could eliminate his target quickly, he could escape the village before the situation worsened. Stepping out of the building, Karok moved carefully through the rain-soaked streets. His cloaking device kept him hidden, but the mud and puddles made it difficult to move without leaving a trail. The humans were searching for him, scanning the area with flashlights and staying close to one another. Then a sudden shout rang out. One of the villagers spotted a strange footprint forming in the mud, a footprint that seemed to appear out of nowhere. The humans quickly surrounded the area, weapons ready. Karok cursed under his breath. He had been spotted. Without warning, one of the humans threw a rock, aiming at the area where the footprint had formed. The rock hit Karok's cloaked body with a dull thud. The impact didn't hurt him, but it caused his cloaking device to flicker. For a brief second, his silhouette became visible. "There! It's some kind of invisible creature," one of the humans shouted. Panic spread through the group, but they didn't back down. Instead, they began attacking the area where Karok stood, swinging their makeshift weapons and throwing anything they could find. Karok quickly activated his energy blade, slicing through the air to defend himself. His blade cut through the humans' weapons like butter, but more of them kept coming. Despite their fear, the humans were fighting back. They weren't the weak, cowardly species Karok had expected. They were brave, determined, and ready to protect their home, even if they couldn't fully see what they were up against. Karok slashed through another weapon, but the rain was making his movements sluggish. His suit was starting to malfunction from the moisture, and every second in the rain weakened him further. The humans noticed his difficulty and pressed their attack, throwing mud and water in his direction, hoping to reveal his position. One of the villagers managed to splash a bucket of water onto Karok's back. The hitman screamed in pain as the water burned through his armor, searing his skin. His cloaking device failed completely, and he became fully visible to the humans. They gasped at the sight of the tall, armored alien standing before them. But instead of retreating in fear, the humans charged. Their courage shocked Karok. He had never expected such resistance from such a primitive species. As they closed in on him, his mind raced. He had come to this planet believing humans would be easy prey, but now they were turning the tables. Karok swung his energy blade wildly, trying to keep the humans at bay. But his strength was fading, and the water continued to sap his energy. Every drop felt like fire against his skin, and he knew he couldn't fight much longer. The humans weren't giving up. They had seen their enemy and knew it could be hurt. They fought with everything they had, pushing Karok further into a corner. The hitman was now on the defensive, trapped by the very beings he had underestimated. As he struggled to keep the humans at bay, Karok realized with horror that he might not make it off this planet alive. Karok backed away, his breath coming in ragged gasps. His energy blade buzzed weakly in his hand, and his armor sizzled from the water that had splashed onto him. The humans were still coming, undeterred by the sight of the wounded alien. He had never been in a situation like this before.
The mission had turned into a disaster.
He knew he had to think fast. The humans were relentless, and the rain wasn't stopping anytime soon. If he stayed out in the open much longer, the moisture in the air would completely shut down his suit. His skin still burned from the water that had touched him earlier, and the thought of more exposure sent a shudder through him. As the villagers closed in, Karok took a deep breath and forced his mind to focus. He had one last chance to escape, one final plan that could get him out alive. His training as a hitman had taught him to always have an exit strategy, no matter the situation. It was time to use it. He looked around, his eyes scanning the village for any possible escape route. In the distance, he saw the dense forest he had first arrived from. If he could make it to the trees, he might have a chance to lose the humans in the thick undergrowth. But getting there would be the hard part. The humans had blocked his direct path to the forest, but there was a narrow alley between two buildings that could lead him out of the village. It was risky, but it was his only option. Karok took a quick glance at his wrist device. His cloaking system was fried, but he still had a few small tools left. With a flick of his wrist, Karok activated a smoke bomb, tossing it into the middle of the advancing villagers. A thick cloud of smoke exploded in front of them, blinding them and sending them into confusion. The humans coughed and stumbled, waving their arms to clear the air. Karok seized the moment and dashed into the alley, his feet splashing through puddles as he ran. His body screamed in protest with every step. The rain pounded down on him, and his suit struggled to keep up with the moisture. But Karok pushed through the pain. He had to get to the forest. That was the only way he could survive. As he ran, the sound of shouting behind him grew louder. The humans were still chasing him, determined not to let him escape. Karok's heart pounded in his chest as he turned a sharp corner and reached the edge of the village. The forest loomed ahead, dark and inviting. He could already imagine himself hiding in the shadows, waiting for the storm to pass and then escaping this cursed planet. But just as he reached the tree line, a group of humans appeared in front of him. They had anticipated his move and had circled around to cut him off. Karok skidded to a halt, his eyes wide with shock. He hadn't expected the humans to be so coordinated. His mind raced as he realized his plan was falling apart. The villagers held their weapons high, ready to strike. The rain dripped from their faces, but their eyes burned with determination. They had seen Karok's true form, and they knew he was vulnerable. They weren't going to let him leave without a fight. Karok's body tensed. His last plan was failing, and his options were running out. But he wasn't going to give up. Not yet. He still had one final trick up his sleeve. Reaching into a compartment in his suit, he pulled out a small, round device, the last of his gadgets. With a flick of his thumb, he armed the device and tossed it onto the ground in front of the humans. The device began to emit a loud, high-pitched sound that disoriented the humans, making them cover their ears and stagger backward. Karok used the moment of confusion to sprint into the forest. His legs felt heavy, and every movement sent waves of pain through his body, but he kept going. The sound of the humans faded as he disappeared into the shadows of the trees. For a moment, Karok allowed himself to believe he had escaped. But deep down, he knew the fight wasn't over. The humans had proven they were far more resourceful than he had ever imagined. They wouldn't stop hunting him. He could feel their determination, even from a distance. As the rain continued to pour, Karok's last plan had bought him time, but he wasn't safe yet. And now he had to survive in a world where even the rain could kill him. Karok crouched low in the dark forest, his breathing ragged. The trees provided some shelter from the relentless rain, but he could still feel the dampness seeping through his armor. His body ached, his muscles screamed with exhaustion, and his skin burned from where the water had touched him. He had escaped the village for now, but the humans were still hunting him. He couldn't believe this was happening. His mission had been simple: eliminate the target and leave. But nothing had gone as planned. The humans, weak and primitive as they were, had fought back harder than he ever expected, and now they were closing in on him. He could hear their footsteps in the distance, getting closer. They weren't going to give up until they had him. Karok pressed a button on his wrist device, hoping to signal his ship for extraction. But there was no response. The storm had knocked out all communications. He was truly on his own. The hitman gritted his teeth. This was it. There was no more running. The humans were surrounding him, and soon they would find him. He had no choice but to make his final stand. If he was going to die here, he would take as many of them with him as possible. He scanned his surroundings, looking for anything he could use to his advantage. The trees were thick, and the ground was muddy, but there were rocks and fallen branches scattered around. He could use the terrain to his benefit, setting traps and creating obstacles for the humans. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. Karok quickly went to work, setting up tripwires and placing sharp rocks where the humans were likely to step. His hands trembled from the cold, but he worked as fast as he could. He knew he didn't have much time. Just as he finished placing the last trap, he heard the sound of voices approaching. The humans were close now. He could see the beams of their flashlights cutting through the trees. They were moving carefully, but they had no idea what was waiting for them. The first human stepped into one of Karok's traps, tripping over a wire and falling hard into a pile of sharp rocks. The man screamed in pain, alerting the others. Karok watched from the shadows as the humans rushed to help their fallen comrade, unaware of the other traps he had set. Another human stepped onto a hidden spike, letting out a yelp as the sharp object pierced his boot. The group was starting to panic, but they didn't retreat. Instead, they became more cautious, spreading out and moving even slower. Karok knew it was time to strike. He couldn't wait any longer. Activating his energy blade, he leaped from the shadows, charging at the closest human with a roar.
His blade sliced through the air, cutting down the man before he even had a chance to react.
The other humans turned, eyes wide with fear, but they didn't back down. One of them raised a rifle and fired at Karok, but the hitman dodged the shot, moving with the speed and precision of a trained killer. He slashed at another human, his blade glowing in the darkness. But the humans fought back. They weren't going to go down easily. One of them swung a heavy branch at Karok, hitting him in the side and knocking him off balance. Another human rushed in, trying to tackle him to the ground. Karok struggled, but the mud made it hard to move, and the humans were relentless. For every human Karok struck down, another took their place. They weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting for their home, for each other. And that gave them strength. Karok felt his energy fading. The rain, the mud, the exhaustion, it was all taking its toll. He knew he couldn't keep this up much longer. His vision blurred as another human lunged at him, knocking his energy blade from his hand. The hitman fell to his knees, gasping for breath. The humans surrounded him, weapons raised, but they didn't strike. They were waiting, watching him with cold, determined eyes. Karok realized in that moment that he had lost. The humans had won. They had defeated him, not with superior technology or strength, but with courage and unity. As the rain continued to fall, Karok closed his eyes. He had underestimated them, and now it was over.